The bus lurched to a stop, its brakes hissing as the doors swung open. Maria Alvarez stepped onto the cracked pavement of the New York City bus terminal, gripping the handle of her battered suitcase. Her hands trembled, whether from the cold or from fear, she wasn't sure. This was supposed to be a new beginning. She had left Oaxaca, Mexico, with nothing but her sewing skills, a few $100s hidden in the lining of her bag, and a promise to herself, she would make it in America. But the city did not welcome her. She spent her first days knocking on doors, applying for work in shops, diners, anywhere that had a help wanted sign. You don't have experience here. You barely speak English. We need someone younger. The rejections piled up. 1 week turned into 2. The cash she had clung to so desperately vanished faster than she ever imagined: bus fare, food, a cheap bed in a crowded apartment. Then, even that was gone. One night, with nowhere left to go, Maria found herself wandering the streets. The air was bitterly cold, biting through her thin coat. She spotted a bus station, warm, safe. A place to disappear for the night. She wasn't alone. Dozens of others huddled inside, some with tattered blankets, some clutching bags filled with everything they owned. A woman with hollow cheeks stared blankly at the vending machine, a child curled up beside her. Maria tightened her arms around herself, refusing to let the tears come. She had not come this far to fail. Her stomach twisted in hunger. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Across the station, a man in a suit tossed half a sandwich into the trash before walking away, already distracted by his phone. Maria swallowed hard. She wasn't a beggar. She wasn't. But hunger didn't care about pride. She glanced around. No one was looking. She took a step toward the trash can. Then another. Her heart pounded as she reached inside and pulled out the sandwich, her fingers shaking as she unwrapped it. The first bite nearly choked her. Not from the taste, from the shame. A tear slid down her cheek. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She had come to America to build something. To create a life for herself, for her daughter Jenna, who was still in Mexico, finishing her business degree. She had promised Jenna she would succeed. And she would. Maria forced herself to swallow the lump in her throat, along with the last bite of food. Then, she wiped her face, sat up straight, and made a silent vow. This was not how her story would end. Maria learned quickly, America had no patience for the weak. Each morning, she woke before the city, washing up in gas station bathrooms, straightening her coat as if it still carried dignity. She kept applying for jobs, but the answer was always the same. Then, one night, as she huddled outside a cafe for warmth, she overheard 2 women speaking Spanish. One of them, Camila, noticed Maria's chapped lips and hollow cheeks. "You need work?" she asked, her voice low. Maria hesitated, then nodded. Camila glanced around before whispering, "Follow me." Maria trailed behind her through the darkened streets, until they reached a rundown warehouse. A heavy metal door creaked open, revealing the hum of sewing machines, the sharp scent of fabric and sweat. It wasn't a factory. Not legally. Inside, dozens of women sat hunched over machines, working at a frantic pace. Some were older, their hands gnarled from years of stitching. Others were just girls, barely past childhood. A man in a suit, Señor Rojas, paced between the rows, barking orders. Camila introduced Maria quickly. "She's a seamstress." "A good one." Señor Rojas didn't ask for proof. He didn't ask anything at all. He simply tossed a bundle of fabric onto a rusted metal table. "You sew, you get paid. You slow down, you leave." Maria sat down, forcing her aching fingers to grip the material. The machine whirred as she worked, the repetitive motion familiar, almost soothing, until the needle slipped, piercing her finger. Blood bloomed against the pale blue fabric. Maria sucked in a sharp breath, but no one reacted. She wrapped her finger in a scrap of cloth and kept working. That night, when the shift finally ended, she received her first pay, a crumpled $40 in cash. Maria stared at it. 14 hours of labor. $40. Her stomach twisted, but she said nothing. Because it was better than starving. Maria spent weeks in that factory, her world shrinking to the whir of machines and the weight of exhaustion. But even in the deepest trenches of survival, hope still flickered. Each night, before collapsing onto the cot she rented in a shared basement apartment, Maria collected scraps of fabric from the floor. With aching hands, she stitched together scarves, bright, intricate designs inspired by Zapotec embroidery, the patterns her mother once taught her under the warm Oaxaca sun. She didn't know what she would do with them. Until one evening, when she passed a bustling street corner in Jackson Heights and saw vendors selling handmade jewelry, paintings, woven baskets. An idea took root. The next night, Maria folded her scarves neatly in her arms and stood on that same corner. At first, no one noticed her. People rushed past, their eyes focused on their phones, their lives too fast for a woman selling fabric. Then, a voice. "These are beautiful." Maria looked up. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes reached out, running her fingers over the delicate stitching. "Where did you learn to sew like this?" Maria hesitated, then whispered, "My mother taught me." The woman smiled. "I'll take 3. Maria's breath caught. 3. It was more money than she had made in a week at the factory. As the woman handed her cash, she pulled out her phone. "I have a feeling people will love your work," she said, snapping a photo. "Let's see if I'm right." Maria had no idea that with one simple post, her world was about to change forever. Maria had never thought much about social media. It was something her daughter, Jenna, used back in Mexico, posting polished photos of business conferences, latte art, and city skylines. But 3 days after that silver-haired woman had snapped a picture of her scarves, everything changed. The next time Maria set up her small stall in Jackson Heights, she found something she had never seen before. A line of people waiting for her. They clutched their phones, showing her the same post. Handmade by an incredible Mexican artisan, fighting for her dream. Let's support her. It had been shared over 50,000 times. Maria's hands trembled as she accepted cash from strangers, selling out of her scarves in minutes. People asked if she had a website, an online store, things she had never even considered. That night, she sat awake in her tiny apartment, staring at the stack of money in her lap. For the first time since she had stepped off that bus, she wasn't thinking about how to survive. She was thinking about what came next. With the money she saved, Maria rented a tiny shop in Queens, just a single room, with bare walls and a worn wooden counter. She hung her scarves on the walls, set up a sewing machine in the back, and named the store Manos de Oro, Golden Hands. The first week, she could barely keep up with demand. Orders poured in from across the city, then from across the country. Maria hired other immigrant women like Camila, who had spent years being underpaid in hidden factories. For the first time in her life, Maria wasn't just working to survive. She was building something. And then, after years of silence, Jenna walked back into her life. Jenna arrived in New York dressed like success itself, sleek designer suit, manicured nails, the air of someone who had never known hunger. Maria barely recognized her own daughter. "Mama," Jenna said, stepping into the shop like she belonged there. "You did it." Maria hesitated. "What are you doing here?" Jenna set down her leather briefcase and smiled. "I have an opportunity for you." She slid a thick folder across the counter. "You should sell." Maria's stomach twisted. "Sell?" she repeated, as if the word were foreign. "To Vellum Industries," Jenna continued, as if the answer was obvious. "They want to buy Manos de Oro and turn it into a global brand. This is your chance to go big." Maria picked up the folder, her fingers stiff as she flipped through the pages. A 6-figure offer stared back at her. Enough money to buy a house. Retire. Never struggle again. But then she looked around her shop, the place she had built from nothing. She saw Camila stitching fabric in the back. She saw the pictures of Oaxaca hanging on the walls. She saw the hands of the women who worked beside her, hands that had once been exploited, now creating with pride. Maria looked back at Jenna. If I sell, what happens to them? Jenna hesitated. Vellum will streamline production. Maria understood immediately. Machines. Cheap overseas labor. A factory stripping away everything that made Manos de Oro special. They wouldn't just buy her brand. They would erase it. Maria put the contract down. No. Jenna's polished smile faltered. Mama, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Maria said, her voice calm. I built this with my own hands. I won't sell my soul for a paycheck. Jenna exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across her face. You're making a mistake. Maria swallowed the lump in her throat as she watched her daughter, her own flesh and blood, turn away. She had fought against strangers. She had fought against hunger. But she had never imagined she would have to fight against her own child. And she had no idea that Jenna wasn't done fighting back. Maria had built everything from nothing. She had sacrificed, bled, and clawed her way out of the darkness. But the betrayal she was about to face would cut deeper than any hunger ever had. It started small. A few weeks after Jenna walked out of the shop, Maria noticed a drop in sales. Some customers stopped coming. Others hesitated before buying, as if they had seen something that made them doubt her. Then, one of them sent her a message. I just bought one of your scarves at Bloomingdale's. Congratulations on expanding. Maria's breath caught. She had never expanded. She rushed to the department store, her heart pounding. And there, under the bright showroom lights, she saw them. Scarves. Her scarves. The same Zapotec-inspired embroidery, the same intricate designs, but stamped with the Vellum Industries label. Maria felt the floor tilt beneath her. She turned and walked out, hands trembling as she pulled out her phone. It took only a few minutes of searching to find the answer. Jenna had gone to Vellum. And Vellum had stolen her work, mass-producing it overnight, selling it for a fraction of the price. Maria had been erased. She stormed into Manos de Oro, slamming the door behind her. Camila looked up in alarm. They took everything, Maria whispered, the words barely making it past her lips. Camila set down her sewing needle, eyes flashing with fury. Then we fight. Maria could have given up. It would have been easy, let Vellum win, let Jenna win. But she didn't build Manos de Oro for money. She built it for the women who had been told they were nothing. So she did the one thing Jenna and Vellum had never expected. She told the truth. Maria took to social media, sharing the side-by-side photos, her handcrafted scarves, and Vellum's factory-made copies. She wrote, simply. I spent years sewing by hand. Vellum stole my work overnight. If you believe in small businesses, let them hear you. Within hours, her post exploded. #JusticeForMaria began trending. People flooded Vellum's social media, demanding answers. Customers who had once bought Maria's scarves now cancelled their orders with Vellum, calling for a boycott. News outlets picked up the story. Activists spoke out. And then, people started showing up. Hundreds of women gathered outside Manos de Oro, holding signs. Support small businesses. Hands over profits. Stand with Maria. Maria stood at the doorway of her shop, staring in awe at the crowd. She had always fought alone. But now, she wasn't alone anymore. The pressure on Vellum was relentless. Their stock prices plummeted. Major retailers pulled their products. Investors demanded answers. And then came the lawsuit. A human rights lawyer took Maria's case pro bono, building an airtight argument. Vellum had stolen from an independent artisan, exploited her cultural designs, and engaged in unethical labor practices. Vellum fought back. Hard. They dragged Maria's past into the spotlight. They called her an undocumented worker. They questioned her business permits. But Maria didn't back down. She stood before the court holding the very first scarf she had ever made in America, the stitches slightly uneven, the threadwork imperfect. She held it up and spoke, her voice clear, steady. "This is not just fabric. This is history. My mother's history. My grandmother's. This is what they tried to steal." Silence. The judge looked at the evidence. The crowd outside grew by the hundreds. And finally, Vellum lost. They were forced to pay damages. But more importantly, they were forced to acknowledge that they had stolen from a woman they believed was powerless. Maria didn't just win a case. She won her name back. And Jenna? She sat in the back of the courtroom, silent. She had made her choice. She had believed corporate power was stronger than her mother's hands. She was wrong. The day Maria received the settlement check from Vellum, she sat at the wooden counter of Manos de Oro, staring at the number. It was more money than she had ever seen, enough to buy a house, to retire, to finally rest after all these years of struggle. She could walk away. But Maria had never built Manos de Oro for money. She took a deep breath, folded the check, and made a decision. She would not become like Vellum. Instead of expanding into a corporate empire, Maria opened a training center for immigrant women, a place where they could learn the art of sewing, start their own businesses, and create a future that belonged to them. She didn't just hire workers. She built leaders. Jenna never reached out. Maria saw her name pop up in business articles, now working for another corporate giant. She had learned nothing. Or so Maria thought. One evening, as Maria closed up the shop, she sensed a presence near the door. She turned. Jenna stood a few feet away, watching silently. Her designer suit was gone. Her polished confidence had faded. Maria waited for her to say something. Jenna looked down, then turned and walked away. She didn't apologize. She didn't come inside. But for the first time, she hesitated. And Maria knew, Jenna wasn't as sure of herself as she used to be. Years later, Maria walked through the markets of Oaxaca, Mexico, the place she had once called home. She passed by an old woman selling embroidered scarves at a tiny wooden stall. The patterns were familiar, woven with the history of their people. Nearby, a young girl sat behind a table, nervously arranging her own scarves. Maria stopped. The girl glanced up, startled. "These are beautiful," Maria murmured, running her fingers over the stitching. The girl swallowed. "My mother taught me." Maria smiled, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a business card and placed it in front of the girl. "Come find me in New York," she said softly. "I have a job for you." The girl's eyes widened. And just like that, Maria passed on the opportunity she had fought so hard to earn. Because in the end, the American dream wasn't about what she gained. It was about what she gave back. They didn't believe in her, until it was too late. But by then, she no longer needed them to. Maria's journey was never just about success. It was about resilience, sacrifice, and the power of standing your ground when the world tries to erase you. Her story reflects the reality of many immigrant women, women who come to America with nothing but a dream and their bare hands, only to face exploitation, betrayal, and impossible choices. But Maria proved something important. Your value is not defined by corporations. Your worth is not measured by what others think of you. And no one, no matter how powerful, can take away what you have built with your own hands. Maria's daughter, Jenna, made a choice. She believed power and wealth were worth more than her mother's legacy. But what do you think? Was Jenna truly the villain, or was she just a product of a system that taught her to think this way? Do you believe Maria made the right decision by refusing to sell, or should she have taken the deal? And most importantly, what would you have done in her place? Comment 2 if you loved Maria's story and 7 if you didn't. Let us know your thoughts below. And if you want to hear more true stories of resilience, betrayal, and triumph, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to True Tales with Natalie for new, powerful stories every day. See you in the next one.